The story begins in 1943 when somebody who went on to become Rodney Dawson was a baby born to a farming family in Lincolnshire. The family, Dawsons, owned and farmed over 1,000 acres of UK's breadbasket. Lincolnshire wheat was essentially their farming business. Rodney grew up and in his young teens became a very keen and enthusiastic birdwatcher. And he didn't really have a mentor, it was just something in him, not his family. He also, in his late teens, early 20s, became fascinated by wildfowl and keeping wildfowl in captivity, digging ponds on the farm, putting a fence around to keep out the foxes, and acquiring, to start with, British wildfowl, ducks and geese, but then moving on and becoming interested in what you could call exotic wildfowl from around the world. He, because of that interest, started visiting the Wildfowl Trust at Slimbridge, which is where I was working, and I met him for the first time there. He married a girl called Jane, who was living not far from their farm, and that's how they just met casually, probably in a pub. And his other interest, which again wasn't typical for a farmer's son in Lincolnshire, was cattle. And there's not much room on a big arable farm for cattle. Furthermore, it's not a good place to keep cattle because you've got to in-winter them, have big sheds and barns and things like that. So Rod's interest was rather, again, what the farm family was doing, his father and his younger brother, and particularly digging ponds was beginning to grate with the family, because every spare bit of ground, the digger moved in, it filled with water and ducks. So in 1972, he spotted an advert for what was then known as the Islay Estate, which is about 7,000 acres of the Rins, starting at, I suppose, Craigfad, right the way down to part of the village of Port Weems and everything in between, more or less on both sides of the Rins. So they decided to buy it, and Rod and Jane moved up here after the Ellister farmhouse had been put into a habitable state. It was actually lived in, but if you went in the kitchen at that time, there was an open drain running through the middle of the kitchen from the farmyard on one side to a burn on the other. So the kitchen was not a particularly nice place. However, digging ponds at Ellister was a great thing. There was plenty of room. There are still sizable ponds, almost a small lake on the left-hand side of the road, all of which dates from Rod's enthusiasm and knowledge of keeping wildfowl. I was visiting Islay through the 60s and 70s, usually 2 or 3 times every winter, to count the geese. There weren't resident goose counters at that time. I was still based at Slimbridge. And I would stay with them at Ellister on occasion. And everything was going absolutely swimmingly until in 1976, Rod was diagnosed with a horrendously aggressive cancer. And he died in 1977, aged just 34. Jane had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter and decided to stay here and to rear them. They went to Porthaven School and to carry on with the ducks, and was already, the 2 of them were successfully breeding some quite rare duck species. And Jane carried on doing that and was the first to breed king eiders in the world, and be successful at long-tailed ducks and things like that. She persuaded the trustees who wanted to sell the estate as a one. The family had installed trustees, and she, remembering conversations with Rod, didn't like the idea of the whole estate being sold. And the trustees were persuaded to let every tenant, whether of a farm or a cottage in Port Weems, to buy their property for 20 years' rent, which was extremely generous. And bank loans were easy in those days if you needed it. And it was the most generous offer. And the trustees were satisfied. They got enough money to fulfill their purpose in life, which was to maximize the financial basis. Jane gradually, not instantly, thought, I want to do something to remember Rod by. And he was a natural conservationist. He didn't have to read about it or study it. He just knew that you had to conserve things. And she thought, well, there's this wonderful natural history of wildlife of Islay. We don't want it to be active conservation. There are other organizations doing that. But what about setting up a charity which would encourage the study and the enjoyment of Islay's natural history? And that was the first aim, and it's still the aim on the trust deed of the Natural History Trust. I was visiting her, and she set up the trust in 1984, hence this is the 40th year, with the aid of 4 trustees, friends from East Anglia. There was Professor Norman Moore, who was an absolute expert in dragonflies and damselflies, the Odonata. I visited him. He had a pond in his large garden, and he'd recorded something like 16 species in this well-grown pond outside Cambridge. There was Chris Taylor, who was a regular bird-watching visitor here and was bursar of a Cambridge college. And there was Ron Hickling, who was a neighbour in Lincolnshire, very keen and serious birdwatcher, and ended up as president of the British Trust for Ornithology for a spell of 2 or 3 years. And the 4th trustee was Dr. Tate in Brookladdy, the local GP, whom Jane had got to know inevitably with Ring Children and any other illnesses, and of course with Rod's death. So those were the first 4 trustees in 1984. Then in 1985, she was beginning to gel the idea of what was to be called a field centre. I was staying with her in autumn 85. She had bought a house just opposite the hotel, which was converted into accommodation for 14 people. And the downstairs, which had been a little grocery shop, there were 2 rooms, just with a wider passage between them. And that became the beginnings of the displays that have grown so much here. And the old lady whose shop it was and who had retired sold newspapers. And rather than pass them to the village shop up the road, she thought, well, if I carry on the newspaper business, it'll bring the locals in and they'll begin to see what it is. Anyway, in this conversation I had with her in November 85, she said, I'm thinking I need someone to act as a director, to get it off the ground, to actually physically bring the trust into being with its field centre. And she looked at me, and my wife and I had been visiting Islay since the 60s. Our older daughter's called Ida, nothing to do with being here 9 months before she was born. And we had always thought, well, if we could find something to do, living on Islay would be a perfect thing to do. And Jane said, I can provide you with money for 5 years to keep your head above water. And by then, I would hope you, Malcolm, would have the trust self-sustaining. So that was how I came to live here, having been visiting for 25 years before that, and how the trust and the Natural History Trust and its centre came into being. Fiona?
Thank you.
All yours. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right. Well, I'll carry on from Malcolm's excellent introduction as to where it all started.
Fiona, do you want to share screen?
Hey, are we not?
Share the screen.
I thought I had.
Really don't.
No, it's not.
That was perfect before you did that.
Excellent.
Oh, I see.
Good. Sort of. Okay. So I'll kind of take you through some of the sort of developments and wee bits about the centre as it was and how it's developed and the people that have made it happen. So this is Jane and Rodney Malcolm's been talking about. This is a picture of the first field centre Malcolm was describing, just down opposite the hotel. This is the premises that has now become where we are just today. There were a number of people involved with the trust in those early years, and the vet at the time, John French, was pivotal in having a meeting on a ferry, which happened to have the General Secretary of the Scottish Youth Hostels Association at the time, and a conversation there with the youth hostel thinking of developing somewhere on Islay, and this building being available, that decision.
Let's see if you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so the conversation there sparked the development of the building that we're in today. Initially, it was to be a 50-50 affair with the youth hostel upstairs and premises downstairs developed into a field centre. The field centres of the time, way back in the early 90s, in different places would have accommodation, which would be the upstairs for in the youth hostel, and labs and availability of space for lectures and things. So this is how the centre downstairs evolved with its layout, which Malcolm kind of walked around and worked out what was happening. So this used to be an old warehouse. So where we've got all the pillars that mark different sections would have been holding up basically the roof, and all the internal walls, and that were developed as part of the development of the field centre area. With development taking on more financial risk, the youth hostel took more than the 50-50, and we developed the areas downstairs. And it's been that way with a 25-year lease from that period of time at £25 a year, which was very reasonable at the time.
It goes on very well with the Secretary of the
and so Malcolm managed to find various bits of funding to enable a lot of this development work to happen. He set out the displays, and the wee plaque there is that it opened by Magnus Magnusson on a Monday, who came over to open and visit it. Malcolm set up all the displays, the old style displays, so the photos and the information on the original boards on the Saturday. Eddie Brown kindly came in, painted all the floors on the Sunday, and Magnus arrived to open on Monday. So this was the original kind of setup we have. It hasn't changed a lot in many years. So, so we have the nice displays and really excellent skulls and various artifacts set out for people to see. Jane introduced funding to enable the start of the extensive library area that we have. And various inputs of funding to buy new books have happened throughout the many years. And this has been the setup for a good sort of 20-25 years, with varying changes of topic and new areas of display information that went up, with various new people coming on board and developing new ideas, and just to try to refresh a lot of what was there. But the information that was on the boards is pretty good. You know, it's pretty thorough and it's very engaging. So the reason we haven't been changing things massively year on year was the fact that Malcolm did an excellent job right at the beginning. But various areas get opened up. The shop area was developed, so selling more items, and so a great meeting place, as we mentioned in the AGM, about adding and encouraging people to use this space. It's been used over the years by many organisations. So we've had the playgroup in here before it went up to the primary school. We're using this area every morning, and for many years the Sunday club always use it on the Sunday mornings, and it's a great meeting area. Over the years we've gathered whatever you gather out and about on beaches or finds. We bring them in. They might only last a week or a few months or a season, but then something new will come in. So all our touch table has always been a touch table, and it's great for families that come in, because they don't have to be frightened of the children touching things. Like you go somewhere and say, well, don't touch. So no, come in, they can touch. Everything that's out is available to touch. If it's behind the glass, it's not for touching, but everything else that's open and out, wear and tear of hands and sticky fingers, it lasts. If it doesn't last, we get something new to replace it. So this is what we like to see, is the families in looking at things. The setup might have been for the lab to be a field centre, and school groups or university groups come in and use it, and it has been for for some small levels. It never kind of quite managed to make it into the realms of frequent university visits coming to do, because Islay was always that much further away for places. So likes of Arran, it's maybe an hour on the ferry, whatever, to go to somewhere, whereas Islay, it was always like 2 hours on the ferry, and it's a lot more travel time for university groups or groups to come over from the mainland. So the draw was never quite there for making that field centre vibe. So it become more of a visitor centre over the years, family groups. And various sort of attractions come in and out of phase depending on who's in. So we've had a wormery, and we've had a nice big log with lots of rings on it, and a mini beast tank, pond tanks, various things. And what's stayed throughout is our skeleton displays. I never meant to ask, when did the minke arrive? The source of the minke whale.
That was found, Ross Lilly found it.
Okay.
who was working for SNH as the Goose Project Officer in the
So the late
late
90s.
90s.
Okay.
And he was walking around Lagan Point and walking right around and coming up past Gulf Wreck. And he found it on the beach. And he thought, that's too good to leave there. Found a bit of rope on the beach, as you often can, made a harness for himself, and brought it up on his back. The skeleton, the spine is nothing to do with that skull.
Right,
But
okay.
it's just one that happened to be around. I think that one was from Samuel. The skull I had at home and immersed bits of it, because you couldn't get it all in a big open stone sink I had with bleach, which is standard process for skulls. And when I thought it was absolutely clean, we brought it down here. It wasn't. When you came in the morning, there was this faint smell. And then several mornings running, tiny little maggots were crawling on the floor, I think related to sandflies, that had, the pores in the bone are tiny, tiny, for so were the maggots. But anyway, the first job of whoever was on duty was to sweep up the maggots, chuck them out to the birds, and hope there would be less the next day. And indeed, there were. I'm reminded that more or less the same time, the National Museums in Chambers Street, Edinburgh, found a sperm whale on the shores of the port, and they took it to their big place down, I think, near Haddington, and cleaned it all up and brought it into the museum. And it stank the museum out. So they took it back for further cleaning. This is nature getting it back.
Yeah, so for those who are online, the skeleton relates to the late 90s, and Malcolm said, cleaned up from Lagan Point somewhere. The large orca whale fin, which we've had on the wall since the late 90s, early 2000s or so, was created by Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust staff who came and used the centre as a base for a year or so. So they designed that, and that's stood the test of time for many years. We've got various guises of sea tank, which are always the most popular attraction for many folk. I developed a tidal tank one year or so. So the water went in one side and gradually alternated either side, to try and get a feel for.
Can I interrupt again? I know they can't probably hear me away. I brought the first aquarium with me. When I left Slimbridge, they had a collection and wanted to buy me something, and I said, I want a decent sized aquarium. And I brought it here and filled it with salt water rather than fresh water, which would be the sort of conventional thing in houses at the time. And the children coming into the centre started bringing me things to put in it, like little gobies or one or two of the easy to catch little fishes. And I found the stones and seaweed. So when we moved here, we not only brought that one, but we accumulated more aquaria. They're a wonderful draw.
Yeah, they're good. And the local kids still bring in creatures to put in them.
And we get a lobster, crab, and Fiona tidal tank and things like that.
Yeah.
And we do live by the sea.
So
And the touch tank.
the touch tank was a sort of mid-2000s development, which means that the kids come and they can actually pick things up, as opposed to seeing that's always a good development.
I got that idea from the marine place on Lake Windermere. They had a freshwater one. And then there's a seawater place somewhere on the north coast of Moray, and they've got something similar. And it was very,
Oh, Gus, oh yeah, I'll talk about.
Gus
Yeah.
Newman made
Yeah,
fiberglass.
I'll
He makes boats of fiberglass.
come on a few more
And he
bits.
made that, and
Yeah.
we got it painted by Kirsty.
I put this up in what's in a name because we started off as a field centre,
Oh, yes.
and folk weren't quite sure. Visitors were sort of, what's a field centre, and therefore not coming visit because they don't know what field centre meant. And so we managed various guises in our committee meetings over the years, is trying to work out what to call ourselves. So we emerged with Islay Wildlife Information Centre for a while, but people were coming in thinking we're a tourist information centre and various things. So that didn't quite work out. And then it kind of moved around to Islay Natural History Trust Visitor Centre, which kind of worked for a wee while. And the most recent kind of name change, we've worked Islay Nature Centre, which actually feels right and feels much better. So hoping that one will stick for a while, and any visitor looking at it will think it's something worthy to come to. So I was going to kind of go through how our characters that have made the centre and the Natural History Trust what it is today. And there's a very nice Malcolm has already been up and explained a lot of the early stuff. And Malcolm's been a major kind of character with the Natural History Trust for nearly 30 years. So, and he sort of works on many things. And our development as a trust and a committee and what we do here is very much gauged by the people who are helping to run it and the skills that they have. So in the earlier years, it was recording records and gathering information, making sure it was all catalogued and the records were there for sightings of things that were here. And that's very much up Malcolm Street. He's very good at recording and keeping records, identifying plants and things like that. So, and
I don't know what that is, but I need it.
And so he does many things. So we always know him as a goose counter, an ornithologist, recording bird information. He's an excellent botanist, and orchids are his thing. So every year still he goes out and counts orchids, the Killen and the greatest spotted butterfly orchid. So the greatest butterfly orchid and marsh helleborines, how many are out in flower. And he does many things. And he goes around if there's a cetacean washed up. This was a large leatherback turtle. I went with Malcolm down at Lagan one year. So if there's a cetacean washed up, he'll go and grab samples and send those away. So he does many things, and has done many things, and has always been very good at our record keeping. But through the years, so our centre managers are key to helping direct what we do here. We've had a number of characters over the years. So in the late 90s, we had Julie Watson. She was Ross Lilly's partner, who was running the goose scheme. So she was here as a centre manager in the late 90s and developed a number of activities at the time. So family activities at the time. Joyce Gilbert was working alongside here as well, doing a lot of school work. So between them developed school engagement, and I helped to set up the Wildlife Watch group with the local children, which ran for a season or so. And this was a wee trip out to Duick for the peatlands with a small group. And so those sort of developments. And they developed later with Lindy McClellan. She came, she was manager here for 5 years and did a lot of development in the shop and was very good at buying in all the right stuff that people wanted to buy. So that was a major development in our sort of revenue exchange. This was another activity with the Wildlife Watch group, building a volcano on the beach. And so various sort of family activities and school activities improved through those times. And in 1998, the local playgroup wanted a venue and used this space here every weekday morning. I'm not quite sure how many years they carried on until space was made available up at the school, and they moved up to be nearer the teaching crowd up at the school. There's a number of youngsters there you might recognise, the Brown children. And I was here at the time, and it was a great thing because the families would be coming in, and you'd have local people in the centre, and they were coming past, and you open the visitor centre, and you were standing there, and they'd all be trailing in, and they'd go like, look at the tanks. There was one year we got a brand new larger sea tank, and we set it up and filled it up, and unfortunately a lesson wasn't learned, and they came in and discovered all the water in the tank was out of the tank because we hadn't put it with a nice bit of padding underneath it, and it cracked. So that was a lesson. You have a fish tank, you must put polystyrene padding underneath it.
There was this phone call to my house about 9:30 in the morning, and help people with floods. And I grabbed the mops we had in the house, put on my wellies, and came roaring down here, and mopped and mopped and mopped. It held a lot of water, that big tank.
It was a lot. So yeah, everyone enjoys coming to look around and guddle in the waters and see all the things. So it's always lovely. That's the key thing, is making sure we've got groups coming in, and the youngsters are coming in, learning and enjoying nature. I helped. I was sort of Lindy's understudy for a couple of years, and then I took over when Lindy finished. So I was involved as manager for 3 years in the early 2000s. Norma Logan was a assistant at the time, and it's always good when you have that crossover of assistant becoming manager, because you don't lose information and you don't lose kind of skills that get passed on as the changeovers. I said I'd throw this one up earlier on. So this was just, we've done a number of questionnaires over the years. One's early 2000s, this is 2015, and we've done a more recent one. So you see sort of 43% of folk came in not knowing that they were going to come in, but they came in anyway off the street. So it's just quite how much you need to sell yourself in the village. So with that basis that we learned previously, is that one of my things when I came on board as manager, being a very practical person and hands-on and building and creating things, is that we wanted to enhance the attraction of the place from the outside. So we had a nice new sign and had a nice mural we created up at it replaced one of George's. I think George had one up, big plyboard, and a picture on that one, which was getting a bit old and falling apart. So we replaced it with this one, and which I painted. And we also kind of created a feature for the entrance as well. So flags and various other things that flutter and attract people, and makes the walkway down the side with the kind of railings and the barbed wire further down, make it a little bit more attractive, and it makes a big difference. So that kind of, those bits fell away in the sort of mid 2000s, late 2000s after I finished. And this was in 2019. We had Brooklady staff had one of their community days, and we decided on a big mural up on the side wall to cover up the ugly kind of look down the side. It's not quite finished yet, but the Brooklady team did a really good job of actually painting up and making it look exciting, and various things have been added all over the years. Beth Clark's always a creative painting person, so she's added a few more bits to it. So, but it's made a big difference. It makes it attractive to come down the alley. other developments was a funding from a grant, donations from the Berlin whiskey group, which, because Norma used to go singing with all the whiskey groups, she had, and so they made some money and they wanted to give it to us here. And we had a little room for the kids to draw in and paint in, but it was a bit basic. So we designed the interactive room that we have now. So nice space for the kids to actually do all the messy stuff, and we can keep all the messy stuff in a nice little area. And murals and stuff. My thing is murals. I like murals, so I painted all the walls so they can add all their pictures and stuff to the murals. So that was always a big development. So every time someone else comes in, they add something new to the features. And also we have a number of committee members that come in and change, and they come with new ideas and new kind of enthusiasm. So Carl Reevy arrived in the early 2000s and was a big force for developing ideas and making them happen. And he was a great one for engaging with nature, photography, so he took lots of photos and stuff for us to use and various things. So we had developed a lot of new technology. As technology develops, and you try and engage with it. So we had touchscreen computers with lots of information that were in association with the museum as well. We put them around the island so they could, people could find a bit of information and maybe draw them to our premises and come and visit. A various bits of technology, so microscope cameras and things, so it was easier for people to see instead of trying to peer down the microscopes, which we hope to get some new stuff to replace that just now. And also another development in the early 2000s was LTD. So Bruichladdich, because Carl had connections with Bruichladdich Distillery and the people with skills there, we had a camera up in the owl box up at Octomore and transmitting TV images down into a TV down here in the centre, and can watch the owl. People can come in and watch the owls. And this is some ringing of the owls up there. So we've got a number of I've tried to put a list of the people who have been involved. So trustees, 67, I think I kind of worked out. Some may be right, some I might have missed a few off. So I went through all the AGMs, working out what names were all on the AGM. So if they didn't quite last between AGMs, then maybe I might have dropped off a few. So the sort of key folk there, I've marked off all those names up there who have been chairs. So there's George Jackson, Malcolm Ogilvie, Carl Reevy was chair, and I was been chair for 9 years until I passed it on to Andrew. So there's a lot of key people who've kind of come in and helped drive that force of what we try and achieve. Some people kind of are there and make small changes. Those that sort of, some come with specific skills and therefore input a lot of kind of effort and things. So we've got Celia Todd was always a good one for taking the minutes. She was, and then we've got Sheila Scott was always great for funding, sourcing funding, and on these talks would always bring a ginger cake, which is why I've always ginger cake for a talk. And we had connections with RSVB and connections with SNH. So it had good connections which made skills and drew skills for developing what activities we did. And there was kind of issues with funding and all sorts in sort of 2013 or so, where our agreement with the youth hostel for 25 years was sort of coming to an end, and there was no kind of clear future to whether the centre stayed or whether we should carry on opening. Visitor numbers had sort of dropped, and the big question is, do we need a visitor centre? Do we carry on without a visitor centre? And at the time, there was quite a few of us who decided that no, we really should carry on. And this was a kind of a bit of an upheaval of change, but it meant there were a lot of new characters that came on board the committee with new enthusiasm and new skills. So we had the likes of Alistair Hutchison came on board, he took on the treasury, but he came in with lots of skills on fungi. And he was a real fungi expert, introduced fungifories, and Dave Webster and Isabel Freeman came on board. Dave's big on geology, so we can develop a whole load of new expertise with the people that come on board. So I wanted the names to be there because everyone is important who comes on the committee, even if it's moral support, even if it's making teas for talks and things, everyone is important. So there's a number of other characters who've come through. Becky Williamson came on as an assistant when I was managing, and so the skills carried on through, and Morven took over after me as the centre manager. And that was the time when the touch tank was developed, and that came from funding by a member, Diana Iron, who £1,000 donation enabled it to be built with Gus Newman and his fiberglass techniques, and Kirsten Laurie painted it. So that was an input of funding from a member, which enabled a feature that's been very valuable ever since. And that was the day of the official opening. It's going to bubble away in the water. It's great. So this is our sea tanks. So in the early years when we had the big new tank, it took a lot of buckets to fill it. And so we had a system where on the Wednesday when the fire crew were doing their manoeuvres and they're practicing, they'd go with their big pumps and pump the water in of an evening. So you worked out when you got a good high tide on a Wednesday night and program them to come and fill it. And so various creatures have come and go through the years. Sometimes a creature stays for the whole season. Sometimes it just comes for a wee bit and we change them and put the other ones back. And the lobster is always an important one, and the big draw is the lobster, so we always try and get a lobster. In recent years, with the spider crabs have been more and more caught by the local fishermen, and you speak to one who's kindly got time to think about retaining some catch for us. And so the spider crabs are always quite a good draw. Sloths of the sea is what I've been told. So I said the lobster's a big draw. It's always quite interesting when you come in one morning and you're going around the tanks to check everything's all alive and happily, and you go to a tank and you find suddenly you've got two lobsters. You have to take a second. You've got two lobsters. Where's those two lobsters? And then you realise, wow, we fed them really well, and it shed its skin, and there's a new. It's like, well, that one's not moving. So a number of times when you had a season where you've got a lobster in all year and you've been feeding it well, yes, it grows, and so you're going to get a shell, and you stick that out, and it's nice, and folk can come and touch it. And every season we get something different. So we've had cuckoo wrasse, and we've had Christmas wrasse before now, and rockling, various fish that the fishermen have found, and we're not always the same thing every year. And my all-time favourite has been the top knot flatfish in 2015, which inhabited the tank and was just cute and lovely. And I still have a drawing on my fridge that my daughter drew of the top knot flatfish. So for other helpers, so Lorna Williamson's Becky's daughter, So she came on board and assisted as well. And so she came on, was still helping out in 2014 when we had another change of main person. Mandy here has been helping out a number of times in a joint venture with helping out RSPB and here at the same time. And always steps in when we're really short of staff or need an extra person to help for a while. Very good people engagement, and that's what we need, is folk who are really good at engaging with the public that come in. Beth Clark joined us as helping out during the school holidays from school, and she came helping out on a Thursday afternoon. She's dead keen on wildlife and sea creatures and all sorts, and has been a real asset. So she helped out when she was in school. She went away to uni for a bit and helped us out in various summers, and she came on board and helped us out managing the centre for a couple of seasons ago, and as a real asset and adds a lot to our collections. And we've finally managed to persuade her to come on the committee, which is lovely to see that someone young came in interested and developed her interest. So she's dead keen on the seashore creatures and can take out the family groups, and really good at engaging with children and explaining things, and taken very good at putting skeletons together. So the otter skeleton, all set out. She set all that out. There is a porpoise skeleton somewhere, which I think has fallen away, and we've tucked it out of the way for now. And if anyone hasn't seen it, just at the entrance, a skeleton of a bat, which is fine and detailed, which Beth put together. So she's a real asset to our team. So we've had various folk changing over the more recent years. So the times when we had a centre manager who was there for 2 or 3 or 4 years has kind of we've not managed to secure people to stick around with us, because we can't employ them for full time, and it's very difficult to keep hold of folk on a seasonal, when it goes season to season. But Jenny Kerr came one season, Chris Bristow for a season, Hannah Sanger was here in 2021, and we had a lot of our survey work at that time, so we managed to give her work that covered a selection of visitor engagement and surveys and all sorts, which enabled quite a well-rounded sort of job for her for the season. So that was good. For a few more folk who helped out and I didn't have photos for, this is Craig delivering a very wet walk one Sunday. And various centre assistants over the years, so they might have come for maybe just on our, employed them for a day or here and there, and they've all helped out keep the centre going at times. And in recent years it's been a little bit more difficult staffing the centre, because there's lots of other jobs available on Islay, and so folk have to go where the money is. So we're chop and change with who we get to open up, but everyone brings something to the game, and we're always grateful for them. So the centre, we start developing it, or thinking we need to change things and make it fresher and stuff. So there used to be a board down the middle next door, and folk would come through and see sort of this kind of blank, a big wall, and thinking, they come through the door and think there's not much to come in for £5, so why should they come in? So we opened it up so that people could see there's a whole load more through the rooms, and the value is definitely worth £5. So we took that down, and we've developed new displays, so researched a whole lot of new information, and with the big printers at Cladley Distillery, Bosses Foundation funded the printing of all these new displays, which gives it a fresh look, lots more photos, and makes it a little bit more professional in the modern era. Inputs from sort of our committee is always in, depending what their skills are. So Kate Coots was on the committee for a few years, and she's very good on the Gaelic, and very creative with her painting. So instead of dull grey floors, we've got interesting water features in the lab, and the leaf litter in the main display area. And if anyone's been into the toilets, the really nice horrible mouldy wall on the far side is now a really good stone dike, which is covered with nice moss and things, which is really real. So all the kids' activities. So we've got pond dipping, and we used to use the distillery pond at the back of Port Charlotte originally, but it's sort of overgrown and not so accessible. And George Jackson, when he got his built his new house just outside Brookladdy, he built and dug out a whole load of ponds out the back. So we've got this big pond network out the back, which we use for pond dipping out there. So that's the new pond dipping area. And then rock pooling, always a big draw for folk. And usually get a good crowd of folk with the rock pooling. So we try and take our activities all the way. So we're into Jura, and we get to Port Ellen, and get up to Grignet, or and you never know what you can find. We'll find in rock pooling. That's always the draw. If the tide's not right, we do beachcombing, anything you find on the strands. Yeah, the bushcraft stuff started to come in and sort of feel more confident and actually kind of getting out and doing that with the youngsters. So we try and get out to sort of various shows. Port Ellen had Festival of the Sea for a few years. And we're down there. Becky kind of sorted out, her and Lorna are very good on the face painting. So that was their thing. And development of going to the Islay show. So I created a number of different activities and stuff to give a draw of activity for folk to do. And always the old favourite is the otter board. And where's the otter? And a nice bottle of whiskey to give away. So come rain or shine, we sort of been. So fortunately, most of the times it's been dry and not too bad. 2016 was pretty wet. Wasn't a good one. And this recent year was kind of battle with the wind, but the tent didn't blow away. So, but we do persevere with those things. And I always attended the Kilhoman Gala when that was running, and get to meet and greet the local folk. And that's when you want some good helpers on these events. The other developments is the rambles and nature walks. They sort of started to come in. I think when Morven was manager. I don't think we did them when I was doing it. And then Becky was very good at doing walks, and she was very engaging with folk and taking folk out. So these get us out and about, and depending on the skills of the person to lead them, they're either geology or they're botany. Botany is always easy because you don't have to chase anything around. But we kind of started calling them rambles because we don't get very far with them. So it may be if you manage 2 miles, you've done pretty well, because there's always something to see. So you walk along, there's something else, and there's something else. So Killanallen is always a must-go place because you've got to go and see all the orchids, depending on the drought or the floods, how much is in flower and what you find. So I'll try and go and see if we can see any marsh helleborines out with the main area, marsh fritillaries. Becky discovered the spring squill, which is at the top, picture at the top, out at Cool Point. So it's a nice sociable affair and going out and seeing what there is. Because everyone learns from everyone else. So you find things, someone finds something, or knows, or a visitor that's come on knows a little bit more than you and can say, oh, this is this. So sometimes this was the geology trip when the Swedish geology folk were out. And Dave's very good at doing a very popular the geology walks. It was always good when Alistair was here to take us on the fungiforays because it's very specialist bit of knowledge. Kate and Lynn did Gallic walks through Port Weems and Port Haven over a couple of years, and that was always something different to attract folk. So we did a longer hike up Castle Hill one time. One of the other features that has been running for many, many years is the walks. I mean, the talks in the centre. So we've been to all sorts of places from sitting in this room. So we've been to New Zealand and Spitsbergen and Brazil, and we've had kind of ecology topics and stuff from folk who are specialists of marsh fritillaries on Islay and chough and corncrake. We've sailed through the Northwest Passage, and we've been talked about bitterns and snowball earth and geology and honeybees and colonsay. So from this room, if we can find and twist the arm of someone visiting who has some particular knowledge, I'm happy to deliver a talk. We've been to many places, and we've had a lot of old favourites. So we've had Gordon Yates and Gordon Lansbury would come every time they came to Islay and bring another talk. So they came year on year and delivered many talks to us, and we do miss them. So
fantastic.
yes, it's such a specialist thing. And I've also got to hear of Becky's adventures of seeing all the trig points or walking all the way around Islay and various things. So it's always it's a good money earner, and if we can get the right topics, brings folk into the centre who might not always come in. One of my all-time sort of loves, and when you actually kind of feel satisfaction that you're doing it right, is when you're out and about with the schools and you go and do school visits. And so we did a nice one with Portelland School a couple of years ago with part of the peatland work, and we did peatlands and we did rock pooling with them, and this made us a nice little video footage of that was just started to come to flower, and that was from the ground. Later on, you've got to look out for one that's
Neil, did you find it? Right here on the first page. Yeah. That's it. That's good. That's okay. Okay. Right, we've got 5,000 years. This is where we're at the moment. Start. Here. And they keep growing up. And the bottom stems that they were starting to be buried in the peat here and then start. Oh wow, put them in the box bucket. Is it scared? Yeah. No, it's scales. Look, it's got the antennae. What's the mechanism? So, I need
So other things we've gradually developed in the last sort of 10 years is a little bit more on research projects. So this is Glasgow University students would go off somewhere for 6 weeks, I think it was, and do various surveys and project work for their courses. And they came to Islay on 2 or 3 years on the trot, and they did some work on some of the freshwater lochs, which kind of carried on with Aubrey Colling had done a lot of work on the lochs of Islay and has them all catalogued in the library here. And so they went back looking at some of these and sampling them to see what was in them. So that, and they sort of delivered a number of talks of their projects here at the end of their sessions. And so that was good. And we also, I mean, my skills are in ecology and surveys and various things. So we started to do more active going out there, surveying and recording particular things. So the Verges project, so we had a whole survey. We employed someone for a full summer to go out and quadrant all the verge roadsides and record all the pollinators that were using these areas. So that was a big research project funded by Botanist Foundation, and it's work that we're sort of continuing to try and engage with each year. Following that, we took on some contract work with the CAN project for recording birds and marsh retillaries on peatlands. That was a three-year project. So it got us out and actually kind of recording stuff and gave someone work, people work at the time as well. This was our season of dung pats with RSPB. And this year's project has been mapping invasive plant species around Islay with the aim that we can work a method of eradication. So we finished the mapping on Islay and Jura this year, and we've passed on the feasibility work to the girls in the office of the Argyll Countryside Trust in Vermore, because they've got more expertise in these things. So hopefully they'll have a plan to get rid of these Japanese knotweed and gunnera throughout Islay and Jura and Colonsay. But with various expertise, we've been able to add a few training events. So the peatland project, Fiona Cameron down in the bottom right corner, she's an expert in bryophytes, lives on Jura. So we had a training event with RSPB staff, our staff, and the foragers from Botanist. came along to learn about sphagnum identification, funding from Calmac Community Fund. We had someone come over to deliver a training event on bushcraft activities for children. So the folk from the Cyber Cafe came to learn, and various other people came to learn how to deliver such events with the children. So that was good. And seaweed foraging. So we had Duncan from Easdale came on a couple of sessions to deliver seaweed foraging activities, identifying seaweeds and learning what you can do with them in culinary cooking. So I've taken on board a lot of that, and now I deliver them seaweed events as part of our Sunday activities. It was a lot of fun. So the key thing that we like is visitor and community engagement. So if we can get the local people to appreciate what we provide for them and get them out, engage with and enjoying wildlife, that's really what we're about. And as Malcolm said, it's not changed since 40 years ago, when that was the aim, was to record what wildlife we had and encourage people to enjoy it. And that's what we've tried to do. So our engagement has some community events here in the centre. More recently, so opened up so lots of different activities. So we've got Kate doing storytelling, bringing a few more folk in for her stories. This past year and a half or so, I've taken on board trying to help maintain George and Megan's ponds in Brookladdy, because that's where we do our pond dipping, and if no one maintains them, it doesn't become less favourable for our pond dipping activities. So I've taken on board trying to maintain their ponds as they're not here anymore, and engage with the high school as well. It's always difficult. It's always been difficult to get engaging with the high school because they're all busy doing their work and things, and they're very busy. So we've managed to engage with the rural skills group, helping us come and clean out the ponds with the overgrown weed within the ponds. And this was the John Muir group who wanted extra things to do, so they were coming. We were helping eradicate and dig out plants that weren't supposed to be there, building bird boxes and little bridges across the ditches. So that was always great to actually be able to engage with the high school and get the older kids out and about. So we attract them when they're little, and they sort of lose interest when they get big. So it's trying to keep them engaged with that, and clearing out the pond work at Shorefield there. So that sort of summarises hopefully where we've a full circle of where we've got to and where we are now from where we were started out. And our next project that we really want to engage and develop is video information. So we've got lots of static displays and things, but actually the movement of things engages people more. So the All Isla Fund, we had put in a big project. We got 5,000, we wanted more, but we got 5,000 to develop some video images and shorts. So I've pulled together something just to hopefully that summarises the 40 years all that Islay Natural History Trust has to means. So in sort of a minute and a half or so, how do you sum up what we do? So this is sort of a little play around with maybe what we can try and do with the video shorts, and put it to someone who has a little bit more skills to put it all together, to tell our story and tell the story of wildlife through film as such. So So that's the talk, and hopefully that's sort of, it's nice to see all the familiar faces here who come to watch it. Hopefully Dave's recorded it so that we can kind of put it out, and those who've missed it could, if they wanted to, could catch up with our 40 years. So this is just the beginning of the year. Our 40th anniversary actually is in August this year. So we're hoping to try and monopolise on the 40 years and engage with that, and have a number of activities to celebrate throughout the year, and have something bigger in August at actually our 40th birthday. So, but yeah, it's what the people here can create and make. So we're only as good as the members and the people helping to run it and make it happen. So we're only as strong as the members and the people involved. But the wildlife is the real feature. I hope everyone gets out and enjoys. So thank you. Come in. There's tea and there's ginger cake.